You dressed in the right colors and everything. Thank you for that. Oh, goodness. I want you to know that Peggy is on track for her true calling. She put her house up for sale, and she sold it in 2 days? 24 hours. So she'll be moving out, but not away, okay? Thank you. Congratulations, Peggy, all right? You're welcome. Greg Lavoie has written this book called Callings, and in it, he outlines callings from this perspective. First, as Vicki talked about last week, we have callings, and we have to honor them. But they're happening probably on a pretty regular basis in our lives. They're not all the same. And then he talks about preparing ourselves to receive a calling. How we recognize within ourselves that maybe there's this calling that is calling to us. And then after that, he says that, and we'll be talking about this next week, what should I say yes to a calling? And oh my goodness, should I say no to a calling? And we need to consider that. And then we're ready for the calling. We can identify and perceive what it is many times. You know, oftentimes callings have been related to religious experiences. We're taught that in church most of our lives, that God calls us to something. And what that does for some people is put a little terror in their hearts and minds, okay? I remember when first time I thought I was called in ministry. And I was standing outside this church that I went to, Baptist church, and I was standing there, and a friend of mine drove up, or not a friend of mine, a friend of my father's drove up in a Cadillac. And I had made this pronouncement that I wanted to be a minister. And I said, boy, I want one of those one of these days. And 2 deacons were standing there. And they said, if you're going to be a deacon, you're not going to have one of those. So you better get your priorities right. And I did. I got myself a Cadillac one day. So anyway, so we have these ideas, if you would, about callings and what they mean and how they should be. And you know, one of the persons that a calling put terror in his heart was Moses. You remember Moses. Well, you may not have known him, but you remember the story of Moses. Let me put it that way, okay? And what Moses did is Moses was born in Egypt, raised by the Pharaoh's family, got angry one day because he knew all along that he was Jewish, killed an Egyptian soldier. And to kill an Egyptian soldier means that you're going to be put to death no matter what. And he ran off into the desert. And so he spent 40 years as an Egyptian in Pharaoh's court. Then he spent 40 years out in the desert. And while he was out there, towards the end of the 40 years, so he's 80 years old now, supposedly, okay? And so when he's out there, what happens is that he runs into a burning bush. I mean, he's just walking along, tending the sheep. Everything is fine. And this burning bush shows up. And then this burning bush starts to talk to him. And I'm sure that Moses, like you and I, probably said, this is weird. What is going on here? I'm hearing things. But he continued to hear things, probably within his heart. And it was a calling to go back to Egypt. And Moses, like most of us, didn't jump up and down and say, thank God I'm going back to Egypt. Thank you, God. What a wonderful opportunity. The first thing he did is said, I can't do it. And he said, God, I can't go back. Listen, I stutter. I can't handle it. I can't handle it. And God said, well, that's no problem. Get your brother Aaron to talk for you. So there goes the first excuse. Then he says, but you know, I killed a soldier. And if I go back, Pharaoh's not going to listen to me. Pharaoh's going to have me executed. I'm going to get killed if I follow this calling. And God didn't listen to that. And then Moses continued to have this calling from within. And eventually he gave in. And then he was told, well, what do I say to Pharaoh? What do I tell him? What do I tell the people and the children of Israel? I mean, how are they going to listen to me? And this is a great answer. Just tell him I am that I am. Huh? Tell him I am that I am. And as he said that over and over again, he started to understand, I am. I am the one to lead the children out of Israel. And you know that he went back and did that. Well, oftentimes, because we were brought up with that story, we relate to that as a calling. So a calling has to be something glorious, something great, something where God intervenes, doesn't interfere, intervenes and catches our attention. But T.S. Eliot said a little differently. He said that our lives are measured out, our callings, if you would, in coffee spoons. They are measured out not in grand swoops, but in small gestures. And what that means is through time, through the growth in wisdom, through the growth in love, through one's own personal growth, we have experiences, spoonful by spoonful, that provide us for maybe what would be our ultimate calling. We never know. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity. Charles Fillmore was born in Minnesota. And he was in an ice skating accident on a lake. And one of the things, he was 12 years old. And one of the things he said later was that every doctor who helped him gave him the opportunity for his leg to shrivel up another inch. That they didn't know what they were doing. And he didn't know what he was doing. And so he had this accident. And he limped and he had to wear braces. Wooden braces in that time. Well, one of the things that happened is that they didn't have the local school there in Minnesota. He lived out near an Indian reservation. And so he went to work. And he went to work in a general store. And lo and behold, there was a woman there who was a school teacher, who was the wife of the captain who had been transferred there to the fort. And she had a son, and she wanted to teach her son. So Charles, working in the store where she worked, was asked to study with them. And he studied the classics. That's how he learned. And then, when he got a little older, he became a printer's apprentice. And he learned to be a printer. And then he got the calling to California, to Colorado, because there was gold in them there hills. And he took off, and he got there. He didn't find any gold, but he found wealth in real estate. He figured that out. So he started to build a real estate empire. But as people do, and I know the answer to this one, there are booms and busts in real estate. And so he had a boom, and then he had the bankruptcy, the bust. He did that twice in two different cities as he followed the gold rush. He ended up in Denison, Texas. I want you to remember each of these stages in his life, okay? He ended up in Denison, Texas. And there he started to study again. He started to study new thought ideas. He started to study Emerson and things of that nature. And he met, what's her name? Myrtle. Myrtle, that's right, his wife, Myrtle Fillmore. I know her. And Peggy passed the test. That's good. Anyway, and so Myrtle had literally a calling that she understood from a younger age, but she didn't quite know how it was going to mature. And eventually, Charles and Myrtle got married and went back to Colorado, where again he tried to build his success in real estate. Didn't work this time, and he ended up going to Kansas City. And when he was in Kansas City, he built a very lucrative real estate business. Matter of fact, there are a number of streets in town that are named after the Fillmores, himself and Myrtle and their children. So he's very successful with that. But Myrtle got sick, and he took Myrtle to see W.B. Weeks, and she heard the message, I'm a child of God, and I do not inherit sickness. Charles didn't quite get that, but he didn't need it, he thought at the time. But Myrtle did. And so what happened is that as Charles looked at what happened with Myrtle and started to study it from a standpoint, after about 2 years he started to believe it. He took it into his heart. Here are the things that he did. Number one, he became a writer. So I guess studying the classics is pretty important. A good writer. Number two, he built a printing business. I'm not talking about a small one. I'm talking about a big one that took up more than a city block, where there were 30,000 to 40,000 people receiving a magazine monthly. He also had to sell Unity. So he had been a salesman. I mean, he was the spokesperson. He was what we would call today the evangelist, if you would, for Unity. And obviously, he had to be able to run a business, so he'd been running businesses, and Unity really became a business as well as a way in which we can learn more about ourselves and God. That's Charles Fillmore. And his ultimate calling was Unity, to found Unity. Do you see how it added up over time? And he might have thought each one of those was a calling at the beginning. But over time, these things work, spoonful by spoonful, and they're working in your life just like that. It used to be when my dad was a boy that you went to work for a company and you stayed there the rest of your life. By the time I came out of college, they told us you worked for somebody, at least 7 different employers. And I don't know what it is today, but 7 different employers. I think that's so that we can get ourselves the experience we need to accept our calling. And if we're going to have a calling, the one thing we know is that it must be from a state of passion. We must be enthusiastic. We must have zeal. We must be excited about the call. We must believe that what we're doing is important for ourselves and others. And how do we do that? Well, it's through a state of love and hunger. We love the dream, and we're hungry to make it happen. We want our calling to come true. You see, the creative force behind all great art, all great music, all great writers, all great athletes is passion. The difference between a really good athlete and a great athlete that breaks records is passion. One has more passion than the other. They may have the same level of talent. One works a little harder. One drives themselves a little harder to make things happen. And so, passion makes the impossible possible. And it creates that emotion within you that you feel like you are alive, that you're feeling life in such a way that you know that you're alive and all is good. That God is good working in your life. But usually it takes a little bit of work to do that. And so we can get all charged up and ready to go about an idea. I do that daily, Vicki says. And I have to check myself daily because I can get excited and then I'm not excited the next day. And so why does that happen sometimes for folks? Why don't we stay excited? Why don't we stay passionate? And what we have to do to prepare ourselves for our callings is look at ourselves and look in the mirror. And sometimes what we find is that we have an unbalanced schedule. We are so busy doing what we do. We are so filled up with time-limiting opportunities. We are so confused sometimes that we can't even be sure that we have a calling and step into that calling. And it's because we are unbalanced. We're unbalanced sometimes emotionally. We are unbalanced spiritually. And sometimes we become unbalanced physically because of that. So how do we maintain that balance? What we have to learn to do is that there's an inlet and an outlet. That we are like that fountain that springs forth and runs into the lake or the river. And then there's that outlet that goes out of the river and into the sea. You and I have to take the time to let God, to let hope, to let love sink within us and become who we are. We must learn to love ourselves and not criticize ourselves because our lives are so busy. I was saying at the first service, there was a young woman. I don't know if she's young or not, but all women are young to me. But anyway, there was this there was this young woman who emailed me 3 times in 2 hours on Friday. Now, I rarely answer my emails on Friday, and I didn't break it. But I did notice 3 times with the same question, because she expected what many people expect is an instant reply, right? Instant gratification, instant messaging, instant phones, and that keeps us unbalanced if we're not careful. So my little attempt to be balanced is that I normally don't answer the phone and or the emails on Friday. It's my day off. Now, not always. I answer Vicki's. I'm no dummy. But anyway, I'll do that because I want to stay balanced. And it takes work to stay balanced, because you have to be aware of what's going on in your life. Is there a rhythm in your life that you're comfortable with? The second thing that creates a challenge for passion and can stop passion is the idea that I am not using my talents. I can't even tell you where I got it from, but I believed all my life, and I still believe a lot of this, that if you don't use your talents to serve others, you're not serving God. That's the one thing God expected us to do. Now, that's when I believed in a God out there. Now that I believe in a God in here and a God out there both, by the way. Because I look at you guys, you see you're God. Because God is everywhere present. So in doing that, I believed that if I didn't use my talents, that I'd be failing God. And I really felt guilty about it at a part in my life. I don't think that's true anymore, but it's the way I felt. And so in not using my talents, so what I was really feeling was a lack of enjoying life, a lack of giving of myself, a lack of being service to others, because there was a time I wasn't. I was serving me, and it didn't work. And I had to go through that to understand what didn't work in my life as well as what could work in my life. And so when we don't use our talents, you see, we get lost. We kind of just want to be a couch potato. And we certainly aren't going to get much passion from that. Maybe a little excitement once in a while, but not much passion. And so in order to recognize where we are, we have to say, how much passion do I have to do with what I do? How much is it in what I do? Am I passionate about my work? Well, studies say that 70% of all Americans still today are not using their talents on their jobs. Now, some of you do. A number of you do, and I know that. And it's wonderful. But if you don't use your talents on your job, you can't feel passionate about what you're doing. You kind of feel like a square peg in a round hole. And so what we need to do is look at that. And what we need to do is, if we cannot look at our jobs objectively and find a way we can use our talents, we ought to leave. Now, please, don't go into the office on Monday and say, Richard said I need to quit. Okay? Don't do that. What you do is you look at the job more critically, you look at yourself more critically, and you determine whether or not there's some talents maybe that you can use in a different way, either on that job or in that company. There may be that opportunity. And then if you can't find that, you start looking for another opportunity somewhere else. But unless you just can't stand it anymore, stay where you are and make a living and look for the opportunity that might match your talents, which will then create a passion for what you're doing. Another thing that can stop our passion is unresolved conflict. Lack of forgiveness. Unresolved conflicts that can stop us for our passion, for our callings, or when we've tried something before and we feel like we've failed. When we tried something before and it just didn't work. When everything should have worked a certain way and it just didn't. And so therefore we are conflicted over that over time. And we tend to say, well, I'm not going to try that again. And maybe that's the right answer. But it could be, I'm not going to try that again the same way, if you have a calling about it. And so if you let that unresolved conflict stay within you, it will create not passion, but really a sense of depression. And when we're depressed, we know nothing feels good. And we don't feel good about ourselves. Even if it's just a few moments of depression. That can happen with us. And so our opportunity is to resolve any conflict, to look at something differently, to say, what is that shadow side within me that needs to come up, that needs healing, so that I can be passionate about the life, about my life, about me. Because God loves me just the way I am. And if God loves me the way I am, there must be something really good about me. And there is. Because we've been created in the image of God, and God is a creator, and we are creators also. And then the last thing, and this is pretty obvious, is that we are unclear about our purpose. We don't even know what to do. And I would say that maybe you're not talking to the right people. Maybe you're not hanging out with the right people. Maybe you're not praying enough. Maybe you're not searching enough. Maybe you're not willing to change certain things in your life so that you got to go in a different way. Because that can be fearful, that can be stressful. And you got all kinds of people saying, don't do that. Oh no. But let me say, if you continue to have the calling, if you continue to be called, you've got to do it. And I know it works. I was a school teacher. See if I can come up with 7 things. Anyway, I was a school teacher. After teaching school, I went to work for a nonprofit organization. After a nonprofit organization, I went to work in the fish business. Everything from culling fish to selling fish in Hampton, Virginia. After the fish business, I went to work in sales. And after sales, I went to work in management. And after management, I went to work for another company. It was my company that I started up and built that and then sold it. I think God was preparing me all along the way to do what I'm doing today. I believe that I had a great opportunity. And one of the opportunities was, and I want to share this with you, it was when I went into the fish business, there was a guy by the name of Louis Fast. It was Fast Brothers. And Louis was the most outspoken in the group. And what Louis said was, on the first day I was there, I'll never forget it, he said, I want you to know what we're all about. I want you to know what your job is. And so I thought he was going to give me, listings, you're going to do this, do this, this. He didn't do that. He said, we are all about feeding people. These fish keep people alive. And that's what we're about. And I want you to know that. And I want you to see it that way because I want you to have a passion, a love for this business. And what I want you to learn to do is become efficient as possible in distributing these fish in different ways to people. Because we are feeding the world. And remember that. And let me tell you, when you're culling a bunch of dead, cold fish on a cold winter's morning, you better tell yourself we must be feeding the world because it's not worth it other than that, okay? And so, anyway, but I never forget that message. What a message, huh? And he kept that, and Louis kept that passion. He always was passionate about what he was doing. And he gave that idea to me and shared it with me, and I appreciate it. Paul said, never be lacking in zeal, passion, but keep your spiritual fervor. Keep the fires going in your life. Circle the word keep. Keep it. Don't let it go away. And if it does momentarily, ask yourself, who do I need to talk to? What kind of prayer do I need? What do I need to do to get it back as soon as possible? I must be seeing something incorrectly here. And as you do that, what you do is you learn, because of the passion, to live life fully. You learn that you are not limited, but you're unlimited. God will never give you an idea that's bigger than what you can do. And people who believe that do great things. Many of you are doing great things. All of you really are doing great things. You may not feel like it right now, but you're preparing yourself ultimately for that calling. To say yes to the inner voice. To say yes to the higher self. To say yes to the Christ consciousness that lives within you. Do that. Live your life with passion and you will find your calling. Thank you.